Glad we're on the same page about the chance.
Using his credentials, enter the enemy's database. And we get located the clone on the top. Watch out. I think it might be expected.
Hello Avengers and welcome back to another battery guide video. Today we're focusing on Mighty Thor, Jane Foster. Jane may have similar abilities to Thor, but she still has a few key differences that will make us explore a little bit differently how to create status and battery effects with her. So let's jump right in. As a quick reminder, the battery effect is when you combine a positive status with a negative status. So you fully apply a positive and you attack it with a negative status. Or if you fully apply a negative, you then attack with a positive. The positive status are Vibranium, PEM, Plasma, and Cosmic. The negative status are Shock, Cryo, Gamma, and Sonic. So here's the build I did for the beginning of this video. Remember, this is a beginner starting build, so you can start playing around with battery effect. I'm not saying this is the ultimate build. Obviously, you can create much bigger builds as you power level up with Discord and Sound Gear and Omega Gear. But I want to show you a little bit what you can do starting out on your own solo grinding. So first we have our melee piece, which is the most essential piece because it's the one we're doing the damage with. And the important part here is the signature attacks will inflict cosmic damage. Signature attack, where I spin the hammer and produce constantly during that spin a status damage, in this case cosmic. This ability makes both Thor and Mighty Thor really strong in the melee side. Now before I started to do the melee attacks, I used my range attack so I could trigger the target buff that I have on my range piece, where a range critical attack has a 35% chance of triggering a damage buff. So once I activated that damage buff, I activate my major artifact and my ultimate, which we're gonna discuss in one moment. In this chest slot, I don't have anything interesting perk wise. I just simply went with stats. In this case, I wanted to boost my might, my valor, and my defense quite a bit because I don't want to have it too low. So this slot is strictly stats. Now this one is one of the more interesting ones because it's an exotic named hero piece. The important perk for this one is the ultimate cryo hazard. And this is where the ultimate came into play. Once you activate the ultimate, enemies that are near you will be affected by a cryo hazard. This means that your ultimate will be applying cryo status on enemies around you while the ultimate is active. And this is one of the things that was helping me out in this boss fight. When I'm applying a cryo negative status, I can start hitting the enemy with my positive status, which is my melee cosmic. And in terms of minor artifacts, nothing too interesting. Again, this was just to boost my might melee stats. This is quite a simple build, but pretty effective for boss fights if you're starting to grind out. The exotic that gives me cryo hazard in the ultimate ability drops from priority threat sectors, which reset daily. So every day you can do a priority threat sector, or you can continuously do flashback mission to get an exotic from there. But it's better that you just wait for the daily refresh because it's guaranteed, whereas the flashback is a chance. Now you're going to be seeing here how I switched up to a range build instead. So the difference here is that instead of trying to apply a damage buff, instead I'm applying a plasma status. Once the status was applied, I started to activate my heroics. You can see here I activate my support heroic, which does shock status damage. It doesn't apply status damage, but it still does the damage. Same for her ult. Once you activate it and the hammer is just flying around, it's constantly doing shock damage. And the assault heroic also does shock damage once. However, you can make it so that the heroic applies cryo as soon as you trigger it. As you can see I did here, he now has cryo applied to him. So I went back and flight up and started hitting him with my plasma. Here's the piece that I used, the Binding of the Thunderer, which increases status damage from all Mother's Blessing attack and increases damage for all shockwaves that are generated while she's overcharged. And the main damage, the range power attack does plasma damage. This is important if you want to really do status damage attack. You have to make sure that it says range power attacks. The other way to apply status with range is by pinning an enemy, but I really don't recommend this being your way to apply status with range because it's really slow and you can't really use it on bosses. Of course, you can also have a piece that will have both, which is even better. And I did not mention major artifact, but as you saw, I used the Northstone of Little Wheel on both builds. And the main difference really between the range and melee build that I did here was changing the stats. I used the same 4th heroic slot where it does the cryo hazard damage. The only thing is that I changed so that it boosts my precision stats instead of my might stats. And I changed the ISOs, so I removed the might ISO and I put a precision one and a valor one. Again, all the changes I did here was simply to upgrade my stats. The only main significant change was the range piece, so I could properly do damage with my range power attack. But everything else is just stats focus. Now in terms of their skills, like I mentioned, the Assault Heroic can do cryo status application instantly, but you need to select it on the specialty side of the skills. As for the mastery skills, you have to make sure that you select the ones that go with the build that you're going. So for example, if I'm going for a melee build, I need to select this one, increase the impact on signature attacks, because signature attacks is the one I'm using for my melee build and is the best melee status damage. If you're doing a range build instead, you need to look for these other mastery skills that say increase the damage of a thrown weapon attack by 10% and damage of shockwaves by 15% during God Tempest. So this will make a lot of nice buffs to your range build. You also have this one that increases stun damage when thrown weapon, that increases attack by 25% on weak points. And the last row, you can select one that boosts your melee attacks when using her overcharge, or select instead one that boosts your ranged thrown attacks. Again, those are things that you have to consider. In terms of the champion points, like I mentioned in the past, focus on the tactical table where it boosts all your criticals. Criticals will help you activate a damage buff, but they also increase the stats of all your DPS. Instead of focusing on specific melee, range, heroic ones, on the first table, ignore that table, it barely boosts your stats, but the tactical one does. And of course, if you need some assistance with your defense stats, then you can focus on the defense table as well to boost up a little bit your defense. Sometimes you're missing a little bit. I always recommend that you have defense stats that are over 1.2k. If you're 1000 or even lower than that, you're gonna have a really hard time with the Omega level threat or even the raid. And even then, for those missions, I recommend a bit higher, at least 1.4k or 1.5k. Regardless of what you choose, melee or range, I still recommend that you use on both melee and range a positive status, because with Jane you can create negative status with all your heroics, so you really don't need to do negative status application with your range or melee attacks, because she does them naturally with her heroics or even a gear piece that upgrades your ultimate with the cryo. Anyway, that's it for this janefoster battery guide. Hope this guide helps you. Again, this is a starting tutorial so that you understand how to create status damage with janefoster, and then as you keep upgrading, you can make her even stronger than what I have here. Anyways, happy grinding and build a very mighty Thor. See you next time.